Hello, everybody. This is Jason Eagle, your natural health authority with podcast Healing Matters. You can find out about me, strategichealing.us. That's my website. I'm also on YouTube, and YouTube the channel is Jason Eagle QRA. And you're on my Facebook as well, which is Strategic Healing. So here we go. Today's is we're talking about sinuses, sinus concerns, sinus troubles. What are sinuses? Sinuses are a big thing. Sinuses are connected to lots of different things. And sinuses are a concept too. There's so much that can go into your sinuses because they're not what you think they are. Okay, so let's get into it. Let me take a sip here. Get ready for the big one. Okay, so sinuses, that's breathing through your nose, and you've got two nostrils. Okay, but your sinuses, if you really see what they are, that's why the people that are these sinus doctors are what's called an ENT, or ear, nose, and throat, because actually they're all connected. And we've seen this before, which is when you tear up, when you start to get teary, you get the sniffles, because literally tears are leaking into your nose. So there's a pipe that connects your actual nostrils breathing to your eye. Okay, that's why sometimes you can see the videos of people where they can squirt liquid or milk or something like that by doing that, and they can squeeze it out of their eye, and it's like, oh no, that's crazy. No, because that's connected. Now there's also another tube which is called the eustachian tubes, and that's connected to the ear. So the ear is literally when you're swallowing or snorting up like that, you're clearing out stuff that is inside. Now let me also describe that it also looks like a butterfly, which is it's these canals, it's these caverns. You have the underground caves inside. You have Mammoth Cave above and below each eye, and it goes deep into your head. If you see your nose, you're touching your nose. Now go back all the way to just in front of your ear. Well, kind of like at your eye. Actually, it does. It kind of goes back. So like right at like your cheek. If you were to kind of go back through there, and actually it does go through your ear, so there's a cavern. So if you were to kind of go from like your eye to all the way to your ear, if you're taking like a line straight across, like where your glasses would be, that's how far back in your sinuses go. Now also your sinuses, like those caverns that are underneath, which is called ethmoid, and go up underneath your mouth. So your nose right here, so if you stick your finger in your nose, pick your nose, you're going to feel that there's a wall that goes through the middle, and that's what's called the septum, and it's kind of like a wall. It's like a flexible wall that kind of goes of a bone, but it's connected with cartilage. That's why my grandpa was a fighter. He was a Golden Globes or whatever back in the 20s, and he had broken nose so many times that his nose was like jelly, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit too about grandpa always having to clear his nose, always having lots of snot. But that go up in the roof of your mouth, okay? And if let's say you had your wisdom teeth, right? Let's say you still had your wisdom teeth, which is open all the way back. So the palate, which is the roof, the dome of your mouth, right underneath that. If you were to stick your finger right there, that's your nasal cavity. If you were to stick your finger, pinky in your nose and one at the roof of your mouth, you can almost touch them. You can see how thin that is. Now take that all the way back, like I said, to your ears. And so inside, if you saw what your face looked like behind your cheeks, under your eyes, is hollow cavities. And these hollow cavities are actually cavities of bone. So the bone is like you got big holes in your inside your skull. And then it's lined with this tissue, and this tissue is very pillowy, okay? This is what's called a mucosal membrane, but the sinus mucosal membrane it's designed to swell up. And part of the swelling up is because if you're in a cave somewhere, or if you're somewhere where this thing just all of a sudden exploded, this toxic smoke, your nose should be able to, number one, start to close down and close these air pathways, and then also fill it up with mucus, because the mucus is like the blob, which is it's your immune system. It's a special tissue that's secreted, but it's very gluey and very gummy because it will grab onto dirt particles and pollen and all this other stuff. And so when people have sinus conditions, they're constantly having these layers of different things, which is things plug up. And we'll talk a little bit about that, some of the mechanical reasons why that plug up. But keep in mind, this can also be plugging up inside the eustachian tubes inside the ears. So people that, long and short of it, sometimes your sinus condition is only cured when you can get the wax out of your ears. And some people don't know how to clean their ears. And, again, any emergency room or doctor will tell you, like, we have to, grandma, some who's especially been using the Q-tip all the time is like, they're just jamming stuff in there. And if they've caught these sinus infections and stuff like that, then it eventually becomes, blocked, and it can be blocked off with like just tons of wax and stuff like that. And so clearing the wax out of the ears is sometimes which allows this constant chronic thing, because I'll talk about this, which is sinus problems can come from the bottom up, which is the guts, because again, let's get into the territory. I just explained what your nose, the eye, ear, nose, and throat, the eyes, ear, nose, and throat is all connected. It's a tube, but that connectedness you swallow, and that goes also to your it splits right at your throat, and one goes to the esophagus, which goes down into the stomach, and then there's a little flap that goes back and forth that goes to your lungs, so you don't breathe in food, right? And so they're supposed to kind of shut off, so it goes into but it's still connected in the same pipe. So your lungs are connected to that. And then also all the way down from, what they call in the food industry, like nose to tail to snout, snout to tail, which is all the way to your butt, all the way to your rectum and anus. And so your nose, which is going all the way through the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, the colon, all this other stuff. So that's why if you have certain infections or dysbiosis, meaning your immune system is always fighting something that's a toxic or an invader, and if the invader got deep down into your guts, that's the thing that can be bubbling up into your sinuses all the time. And so a lot of times that's where we get into a lot of digestive problems are the things. And we get into what are some of the causes. Sometimes one of the things is they would like to say it's allergies in terms it's the breathing in ragweeds type of stuff. But it can also be allergic reactions to people, for instance, with dairy. So where's the dairy going? It's not going into your nose, it's going into your guts, and then you have to kind of digest it. So, we kind of know people that get really gassy and lactose intolerant. But see, you can have micro lactose intolerant, or you can have, let's say, gluten intolerance. People who are intolerant to wheat and they're constantly eating it, it's constantly making you have this sinus trouble. So you're poisoning yourself. So in the indication, I'll get in terms of what sinuses are, but let me cut to the chase on that one, which is how do you know it's your food? And there's a caveat to that one, and that's where it's the teeth too, because let's also get back to the structure. But if the digestive tract, if you're constantly eating a poison that is your body's building up an immune system, let's say the peanut allergy person, and they're constantly eating little bits of peanut, and they're having an immune reaction. And so, again, if it's a food thing, the telltale sign is when you eat it, you start getting sniffly. So let's say a person eats a salad or eats a fruit or something like that, or something that typically is like blueberries, that's non-allergenic. Unless something weird is going on, they will not get sniffly, right? Whereas if they eat, let's say, the cheese, or they eat any of these things, and you start to get sniffly, you start to hear a person get like this, or the nose starts to run, either immediately with that food, or let's say within 20 minutes. Let's say you sat down and you ate that cheese sandwich or something like that, and about 10 to 20 minutes later, you're getting all nasally. That is a telltale sign that it is the food. And so what you do is one of the things I help people with this is starting to, if it is the food, but you don't know what the food is you do a restrictive diet. And again, I like to recommend, the meat and greens, the Chinese meat and greens, which is, it's very, very, very basic. You're just having meat and vegetables. And you limit it to that. You don't have the dairy, you don't have any of the grains, you don't have any of this stuff, and you do this for about a week to 2 weeks. And if your sinuses get way better, or any little bit better, meaning, wow, like that's better, then you know that it's your food, okay? And then you start to wean yourself back into the foods, and then you can start to determine what that is. Sometimes it is because your guts are so plugged up, so a lot of times within Chinese medicine, they're talking about the small intestine and large intestine, is if you are not a good pooper and you a very clogged up older person that's clogged up, and that's where colonics and correct laxatives and stimulative laxatives, as well as just that whole world of cleaning a cleanse, what they would call kind of cleanse. Now, a lot of times when they say cleanse, they're talking about the intestines, and a lot of people are also talking about the liver gallbladder. That's a liver and that also can be one of the things, because within the meridians, all of these intestinal things go through the sinus area per se. And so that's one of the, we can talk about that a little bit later, but I'm just kind of going the bullet points of what it could be. If it's coming from the bottom up, again, that's one of the things that most people would not think about, unless you're a natural health type of thing. And that's one thing that you want to know, because that's the only way to fix it. Now, sometimes too, it's a spine. Sometimes it's literally you have a spinal problem, and I've known a lot of people that have had, like for instance, from falling down and hitting the tailbone, or let's say a whiplash neck injury, especially C1. So there's a lot of people that have had neck troubles where the body work / chiropractic and getting an adjustment can make all the difference, because now the nerves are working better. I'll get a little bit later into mud packs. Mud packs directly on the sinus or other parts of the body is when you have, I've tried everything else and nothing else works. That's one of the things. Then we can also talk about the infection right there. Okay. So sinus infection is, again, especially if it's plugged up, these canals have, like, the pillowy tissue has now closed together, and then it's sealing in some old mucus. And many times you'll find people that have, this is where some of the neti pot has really helped, which is using the salt water flush and xylitol water flush and stuff like that, because sometimes you got to clear out those jams, and sometimes you can have old dried mucus that is very infectious, that is just a harboring ground because it's warm and dark and moist up in there, and it's a perfect growing medium. The sinuses, and as I said, behind the eyes and all this other stuff, it's a perfect place for stuff to hole up, and your body just can't get rid of it. So sometimes mechanically having these things taken out with even the, they make my dad used to have one, which was the water pick. They make which usually squirts a jet of water into your teeth, and you can put salt water in there or whatever. You can hook it up to actually go into the sinuses and clean that sinuses out. Sometimes it's what's called a polyp. Literally, their body has created inside, especially because they are basically tunnels that go into great big caverns. So the tunnels that go between the ones above the eyes to the central core, which is in the nose, deep inside there, and then the ones that also go to below the eyes. There are these tunnels, and these tunnels can then get essentially a tumor. A polyp is a tumor. Now, it's a response to infection. So if you can clear the infection out, a lot of times people with polyps they're the ones that have to constantly be on antibiotics and things like that. But the risk of antibiotics, eventually you develop superbugs in your own body, and antibiotics don't work anymore, and now you've messed up your gut. And so it really can do a lot wrong. But so that's, if it is a polyp, if it actually is something structurally there are some passive ways to shrink it and get it to go, but also sometimes that's where surgery comes in. Again, you don't immediately go to surgery, but that's where an ear, nose, and throat kind of comes in, and sometimes the only way to open it up and clear it out and clean it out is to actually get that blockage out of there. Then the other thing is we get into another thing that's what's called the tonsils, adenoids. Those are connected. So a lot of times when people have swollen adenoids, that they're really, really big, that's another thing that's trapping and closing off, because when you have that nasal drainage, that it's going down the back of your throat, because that nasal will actually drain these juices back down into, and it goes into your stomach, okay? And that's the way it's, killed, which is either you spit it up and you cough it up, or it goes into the acid of the stomach and you kill it. So your body is designed to kind of clean this thing out. Okay, well, the adenoids are these glands in here, and when a person gets a strep throat or something like that, they can have where the adenoids become swollen. But if you get people, especially from a young age, that has some of these things going on, and they have chronic infections to the point of where the adenoids, they used to, if you remember, like their old Richard Scarry books or something like that, or the old books of children's book of the 1950s, a big part of it was kids sitting in the hospital eating ice cream because they had their tonsils out. And so, because it happened a lot, and they used to take tonsils out like left and right all the time. Now they rarely do it. And sometimes I've seen some cases where actually that was what finally stopped us, because the adenoids became so infected and they can actually develop stones that they became permanently enlarged. And these are people that then later had, for instance, a blockage of the airway and had a lot of sleep apnea and stuff like that. The chronic sinus stuff turns into sleep apnea where you're not breathing through the night, and it gets, So I have known people that their sinuses finally, after year and year, finally cleared up after having it removed. But there is another way to go, which is Dr. Eric Taylor, he's this dentist, and there's a couple other ones that he uses a laser, but there's this very specific laser called the night laser. It can be used for dental, but it could also be dialed into a specific frequency where they shine it, they stick it down your throat, and you say, and then they shine this thing into the adenoids. And where swollen adenoids actually it contours them. It's not cutting them away, it actually is sending this healing light, and it gets rid of the infection. And so with swollen adenoids and distended and now are big, because when they say, okay, open your mouth and say, that's what they're looking at. They're looking at down your throat. And these adenoids, if they're the normal shape, they kind of peek out a little bit, but not much. But if you say, when a person has swollen adenoids, you see it's like the uvula is that little thing that hangs down, that little dangle, but then it should have a clear airway. It should be then a good shaped tube, pretty big, when a person goes, so they can breathe in. But with a swollen adenoid, you could see it's these other structures, these glands that are like golf balls. And they can become like the size of golf balls. They're narrowing that spaceway. So they used to take them out. They don't take them out as often. But again, if that's one of the problems, then that's where the mechanical fix of actually, and like I said, I recommend Dr. Eric Taylor because he's the only one that I know in Michigan that has a night laser. And it does reduce the size of them. It really is amazing. So if you're the right candidate for that and you got these swollen adenoids, that might be part of it. Okay. As I said, toxic colon. Sometimes we can have where people have lots of lung infection, and so they're coughing it up. They're coughing this stuff up, and what's causing the sinuses is because essentially they got bad lungs. And again, like a big time smoker that has that have been just smoking regular old, full additive proof, super toxic chemical cigarettes or tobacco for years and years that's breathing up into the sinuses. And so there are things you can do, I'll get later, in terms of what you can do to clean your lungs out, to clean your sinuses out. The air you breathe, you can actually change the air you breathe and fix it in the nose and in the lungs, or at least help it, okay? Like you would want to know if a Band-Aid or a wound needs a Band-Aid. So sometimes it's not everything, but it's something, okay? Which is even the air you breathe. And so we'll talk a little bit of we're not talking about an oxygen tank. I don't want things to get that far. If it's gotten that far, boy, oh boy, it's hard to get out. So we're talking about, why do I want to treat these things as sinuses? Because, literally a lot of the people that are on oxygen and stuff like that is they didn't treat the sinus, they didn't treat these things, and this is what happens later because it creates some permanent damage. So, and again, many times people with sinuses, like my father, became addicted to the nasal spray, the decongestant antihistamine type of thing, but he became addicted to it because what happened is that his system, when he would spray it, that would be the thing that dilated and opened up, and he could breathe a little bit, but then it would close back down. And then even the tissues then became addicted, so when it would close back down, if he didn't keep doing that stuff, it wouldn't open up and he couldn't breathe. He had a bunch of these. He had to have a bunch of nasal surgeries and stuff like that. Now, where my father is that's where you get into it, where sometimes the nose itself, so let's talk about the nose itself, which is a lot of people think, it's my nose. Well, it's this whole cavity type of thing, and it can be from breaking your nose. So let's say a person that got punched, and remember the story was told about my father, probably the first time that it happened, because my father was not born with this. It was, when but he had a really, really bad, he suffered with really bad sinuses for a long time. And but it probably started when he was, I think, a teenager. The story goes is that there was some guy that was picking on some girl, and my dad stood up and he got punched in the nose. And he came home and he had a bloody nose, and he didn't tell grandma about it, didn't tell his mother about it, and they didn't go get it treated or anything like that. But what can you do, like with a broken nose? But he had a deviated septum, and again, now what can you do if you do have a broken nose and there's a deviated septum? Sometimes it can be repaired and non-surgically. Let me tell you about this. You may not know, because there's a lot of people that have a deviated septum. What is a proof positive that you do have a deviated septum is you can always test yourself. So get your nose on a good day where I can breathe from both nostrils. So there's air going on that one. They're about equal. They're a little plugged up today, but not too bad. At least I can breathe through both of them. But you'll get some people where it's like only one works and then the other one doesn't work. Now, sometimes it can be plugged up with stuff, but sometimes it can actually be like people never get any air into that airway because the little door is closed it shut. Now, there is a technique that the ear, nose, and throat guys can do, but also some chiropractors, and it's a balloon. What they do is, again, because I can't stick my finger up there, like if you could get your finger up there, you could actually move it back in place, like a neck vertebrae being out of place, like a doctor or a chiropractor is able to pop it back in place, or whoop, move it back in place, and then now it opens up. Well, typically most people don't treat this, and either it's surgery or something like that. Well, the balloon actually is they stick these things up the nose. They're kind of like these little gauze type of things, and they fit right inside your nose, and you can breathe through your mouth, so it's not. And what it does is they slowly inflates, and what the air does is it balances it, and literally they can direct the airflow so that they can inflate the bag a little bit more on one side, and that moves the septum back in place. So sometimes if we have a deviated septum from a car crash or get punched when we were younger or something like that, which happens to a lot of people, mechanically it can be put back in place so that you have equal, so that the tunnels, the actual nose tunnels, are the same size. A lot of times you can see people where their nose is twisted, and it wasn't that they were broken, it like their jaw is twisted and one eye or one ear is their whole head is shifted. And a lot of that has to do with just how people kind of grow, but also it can come from spinal damage. So that's a good example of some people that have chronic facial distortion and the sinuses that are with that. It has to do with the forces that are going through their body, and that can be changed. Now let's get again to one of the top things that sinuses are, because what's right next to your sinuses? It's dental. It's your teeth. So if you have, for instance, dental infection, a bad tooth, especially in the upper mouth, you got the lower jaw, but then the upper. The upper is right where the sinuses are. And actually, many times, some people, the roots of the actual teeth grow right into the sinuses, kind of erupt in that cavern. So that's why sometimes people having a tooth removed, it can actually pop a hole in their sinuses, and that has to be repaired. But if we have, let's say, gingivitis, okay, which is very, very common, but the rotting gums, okay, where's the rotting going? It's going right up into the sinuses. So as the juices go into the sinuses, but also you have to understand, the reason that people with gingivitis have stinky breath, really stinky mouth, and it almost smells, poopy, is because it is these bacteria that are living inside there. And what you're smelling is the gases that the bacteria are producing, right? And many of these gases actually, they test them, especially the ones that live inside the gingival pockets, can tend to be anaerobic, and the gases they produce is cyanide. So many times, and won't cyanide kill you? Yes, actually. So what's happening is if we have a bad tooth with a bad root, or ginger, and many times people have multiple, then those infection, until that tooth is taken care of, until the gingivitis is treated. And I also recommend Dr. Nemeth. Dr. Nemeth does this, uses a laser. Now, they used to have to scrape and stuff like that. Now it's just glorious. You just use a special laser, and what it does is it kills the infection, gets the gums to tighten up. And I've known many people who've had a tooth removed or treatment of their gingivitis that made the sinuses sound, because that's where it was coming from. Is the, you want the sinuses to stop reacting, but you don't want it to stop reacting to an actual attack, right? And so many people that are on a lot of sinus medications and Allertac and all this other stuff is they're sedating their immune, because again, if you go to, let's say, an antihistamine, histamine is a reaction to an infection or a trauma. So, okay, what's a histamine? So a histamine reaction is you got sinuses and the watery eyes and the dry eyes and all this other stuff that they say, take a Benadryl. Okay, well, a true histamine, again, histamine is not a bad thing. Histamine is supposed to be there. What's a histamine reaction? It is a bee sting, or is a poison ivy, or it is hives, or it is a mosquito bite. When you get punctured by these things or touched by these things, then your body develops a redness and a welt and a swelling, and it sends, that's what a histamine reaction is. And you want your body to do that because, the problem with and you want it to be a correct histamine reaction, not an overreaction. And so the whole idea of taking allergy medications is going like, oh, your immune system is stupid, doesn't know what it's doing. We're just going to turn it off, right? And so you have all of these different things that you turn off what's called the immune response. And histamine is one of them, but then we can also get into, let's say, the Zyrtec or these other things. They're turning off what's called the cytokines. They're basically tying your arms behind its back. It's taking the immune system, and instead of supporting its fight, or actually even tracking down what it's fighting, it's saying, you're not fighting, like you're just overreacting. It's kind of like what they call a hysterectomy. That's why they called it a hysterectomy. This lady's crazy. Let's take her uterus out. That's why they called it. She's hysterical, and so there's some real brutal stuff that medicine, that healthcare has done. But again, it is like I like to say, which is anytime your body has a reaction, especially an immune reaction, it's like Lassie, or it's like, the boy who cries wolf, but the boy that cries wolf that has scratches on his body. So it's not appropriate to call him even the boy that calls wolf. It's the wounded boy. It's like you literally have the scars for it. So an immune reaction needs to be tracked down rather than sedated, because if you keep putting people on, let's say, allergy medications from their toxic reaction to the poisons in their mouth, you're going to make them sicker and sicker and actually eventually speed up their death, because you're taking away its ability and then not addressing what, and many dentists, and again, here's one of the other things that it can be really get sophisticated, is that it could be an old dental restoration. So you can have infection not in the root, or an old root canal can be it, but let's go dental rest, the old fillings. Look at people with old silver fillings that are black. I got these fillings in this molar. Well, the fillings are metal. That's why the new dental is you don't use metal. You use metal-free, meaning you use the ceramic, the injectable ceramic or the composite or something like. Now they make an injectable flowable ceramic, so you can get the best of the best, which is it's able to glue to the tooth. So you can put a filling in, and the problem with metal is that metal, when you drink hot and cold, the metal shrinks and expands faster than the tooth does. That's why sensitive teeth come from having the metal fillings. Well, eventually what happens is, because there's no glue that makes a silver filling, mercury silver filling, attached to the tooth. And so eventually it's 20, 30 years old. You've got cracks in that thing and salivas. And what happens is that filling has filled up the tooth. And so it's really sitting inside the tooth, kind of like a caldera. And what's happening is underneath that, there's a whole party of bacteria is growing in there, eating away at the tooth, but more importantly, oozing into your mouth and gassing into your sinuses. So people are swallowing this stuff, and people are literally vaporizing in their sinuses. So I've known many people, which is, you're never going to fix your sinuses until you address the teeth. And there's many dentists who don't think nasal has anything to do, and there's many ENTs that don't think that dental has anything to do. It's like they've got a separate mind. It's compartmentalized. But I'm telling you, the real good dentist and the real good ENT goes, oh, that's what it is. It's your teeth, your rotten gums that are gassing into your nose, that are constantly making you constantly all plugged up. And the plugged up is not something that we should turn it off to make you feel better. Or even the neti, even when natural people do this, I just do a bunch of neti pots or something like that. But don't address where it's coming from, which is if it's the tooth, you gotta deal with the tooth. And sometimes too, it can be the glands inside here, the salivary glands. So again, when you go into the gut, we talk about like a dysbiosis. So for many times, it's getting rid of the gut infections. I found allicin, which is garlic, to be very, very helpful. When I talked about the allergy type of stuff, the Aller Cleanse, which has quercetin in it and NAC. I've talked about when people have plugged up nose and it's just like thick and it won't come out. You wish you could blow it out. You take NAC, like 4 NAC, even a couple times a day. You keep taking NAC, N-acetylcysteine, until it starts to flow. And then it starts, and then it starts to flow out. You blow it, you get rid of it, and then you clear it out. So there's a bunch of stuff that you can do. But like I said, I'm talking about concepts of what could it be, because you track this stuff down. Like I said, the dental is one of the big things that's really not really well looked into and not really well understood. And that's where I go, okay, the gut, we all know about, like, for instance, like I said, the gut infection. Like I said, you could take allicin, there's a whole host of all different types of things. But once you kill, another thing is just people who have the very big bellies, the big swollen bellies, that it's because the sugar. So people with yeast infections or have a dysbiosis of too much of the candida, the pot-belly beer drinker kind of guy is really just like blown up with gases, and that's also what's going to their gut. So you find a lot of people, which then develops what's called a dysbiosis. So my tactic is you got to first get rid of the enemy and really calm them down and then rebuild. So when do probiotics come in? Probiotics come in after you've really done kind of the big war. And probiotics, we know about probiotics for the gut, that can help the sinuses. But there are actually probiotics in the sinuses themselves. And there's a special one called BLIS, something like that, I don't remember. But what it is we have different glands that are inside here, that are inside the mouth, okay, that literally secrete into the nose, okay? So the salivary glands and the submandibular glands, these are glands that secrete juices, that is, you mouth waters when you're hungry. Mouth watering also even opens up the nose, because part of tasting is actually a smelling. So like, again, when you're tasting a good wine, you take it, or you sip it, because actually some of the tasters are in there. So when we start to salivate, it actually activates the nose too. Then we also have what's called the parotid glands, which are right here in the cheek. These are all part of not only secreting enzymes to digest, but also very specific organs that if we ever get an infection, and again, sinus infections are going to be very, very apt to happen, and dental infections. Now, again, when I call a dental infection, let's say a normal person that has super, super healthy mouth, a person who's like, from Africa, and they have their full mouth of teeth and they've never been to the dentist, okay? Well, they still have to have some sort of infection, a response inside, an immune response inside the mouth, because everybody's always chewing on something, whether it's a piece of meat or it's a little seed that gets underneath the gum that you have to use floss for, okay? Now, there are many people, literally, truth be told, really super healthy people that have never flossed and never brushed their teeth because they have a great immune response. And what's supposed to happen is but they still get these things inside their gums. What happens is the body's immune system, through these organs, will cause the immune system to go there. That swells it up a little bit, and then it spits it out. And so, our ancestors could live without, but see, it's always better to learn a little bit of hygiene. And so, that's what these organs are. So the organs are not just part of digestion. They are literally part of, this is a very risky place to be. And so we want really good immune system there. And immune system is this in these immune organs, and it's a probiotic. So there's a probiotic that you can take that actually helps to stimulate the probiotics inside the mouth. Xylitol, which is, you can get the Xylar nasal spray, and also dental stuff, because the xylitol is one of these healing sugars that kills off the bad bacteria while supporting, and it's a probiotic. It's what's called a prebiotic. And so you can ingest it, you can put it in the nose, you can also put it in toothpaste is made with it. There's mouthwash, there's all, so you can do your teeth with it. And that's essentially what is a really good thing about really helping sinuses, is really taking your best dental care. You can't check off the list that you've done everything for the nose until you really have done everything for the teeth. Then sometimes we get into the nose literally can be, like I said, broken and damaged. And that's where we do what's called the mud packs or castor packs. Because again, it's the body has to connect to it with the immune system and the neurology. Okay, so your nose, every part of your body, every single little cell has to connect to the brain. And that's electromagnetic. It has to be connected to the magnetic field. And so sometimes injuries not only do damage in terms of shifting something around the body, but it can essentially blow an invisible fuse, a field. Now, in that realm, no amount of surgery or this other stuff, even though you put it right in the back place, if the energy's not on, it doesn't work. So the mud packs, essentially, I've seen people that have actually even had a deviated septum. We did the mud packs correctly, the eye packs, not just on the nose. There's a very specific sequence, but it includes, yes, doing it on the nose. I've seen their nasal thing clear up, and then a deviated septum actually move back in place, meaning it moved itself back. That happens. I've seen broken clavicles moving back in place without being pushed on, because it's just so hard to describe, but it's not. You are growing, your body is growing because it's being put there. If you think about what the body is essentially the body is constantly a 3D printer. And so even in a 3D printer, if something comes out wrong, it can be remade and made right. But see, what it's being made as is it's the computer code. So there's an invisible energy field, essentially, that is the growth pattern upon which our body is. And every 7 years, you're a whole new cell. And so literally, if the cells were over here within 7 years, theoretically and practically, it should be back to where it was supposed to be. But those forces have to be there. And so that's where we get into the eye packs of doing that. Castor oil packs is literally, you can do a castor oil pack on the nose. That includes, so if we have a lot of sinus problems or a lot of the sinus infections, so the people that have, like, for instance, those literally where the caverns are old and you need to clean out the sinus cavities, how would you do that if you can't scrape them out? And again, you can't, the neti pot doesn't go all the way in there. You're never going to be able to get water to go in there. However, you can get almost kind of a drawing effect. So there are mud packs, the clay packs, that do a drawing effect. Like a potato will suck a infection out, or an onion will suck an infection out. Actually, it does that. I've seen people that have had a sliver that literally, when it's deep in and you couldn't get it out, and then the body grew over it, but it was still a nub in there. You put a potato on that, and after a couple days, sucks it right out. So the castor oil, actually, you put it on cotton flannel and you put a hot pack on there, and the heat will actually start to clean stuff out. It doesn't necessarily just draw it right into the cotton flannel. The mud can also do that. I've seen mud actually on the sinuses, is like that face mask type of thing. It does a drawing effect in terms of being able to clear, because what it's doing, it's causing you to bring new fresh fluid in there, which then also causes your body to dump through the bloodstream and through the lymphatics and stuff like that. So your whole face is filled with this lymphatic tissue. And then too, if you got people that have a lot of the redness and swelling and stuff like that, just like you would do on a redness and swelling in your arm, put an ice pack. I've known many people that, again, because what the ice does is it shrinks the inflammation and it literally squeezes the tissue. It helps to kind of clean it out. So sometimes you can actually do direct stuff. Now we get into also environment. Okay, now some people, maybe they eat well and they don't have a broken nose and they got good teeth or something like that. But maybe it's the environment that you live in. This is where I made notes for myself. My grandpa blow, right? My grandpa always, he was the guy that always had the handkerchiefs, and he was blowing his nose all the time and clearing his throat out and stuff like that. One, like I said, yes, he got his nose broke, but he worked in a factory. Grandpa was a foreman, or I think so. That's what at the Buick plant up in Flint, which means he was often. So if you work in a plant, like for instance the tool and die guys, or in a plant, if you work in an area where there's lots of dust and stuff in the air, your body is constantly making this mucus in order to trap this poison so it doesn't get into your lungs, it doesn't get into your heart, blah, blah, blah. Now, sometimes people, they think they have a clean house, but they have a dirty house. And sometimes, again, getting the forced air, getting your ducts clean can make a huge difference, because if you're constantly having a reaction, you have to be on these pills to stop you from breathing your crap air. So cleaning that thing out. A lot of times people also have found there are these really good air filters. Sometimes it's mold. Sometimes you got mold, especially black mold. That's when you can get these tests, and you better know if you got black mold, because black mold is the thing that can turn into really bad sinus lung problems. And you find a lot of people that even, people that have really bad sinus problems, they can take the tissue or the fluid and culture it. And there's many people where they find mold in you're molding on the inside. There's mold in your sinuses. There's mold in your boogers. Well, where'd that mold come from? It came from you breathing the mold. So a lot of times it's you got to also look at your house and clean up the house. There's a couple things, like I said, is the air filters. I also like what's called a halo therapy. There are these little machines that you can get where it's sending a fan and it's pushing air through, like Himalayan salt or salt, which is that cleans the air, and it actually does that. Now, there's one that you can do where you can breathe it into your lungs, but also if we're trying to target it into the nose, it's what's called a neti inhaler, and it is this little, like one of those things that you stick up your nose, like that has this nice botanicals, or even like something that like it fits up in the nose. Kind of looks like a chapstick thing with a rounded edge. Well, what it has in there is it also has salt plus some herbs and stuff like that, like eucalyptus, and so it actually kind of opens you up. But what you're doing is you're breathing air through salt, especially Himalayan salt, or this again, these types of hard rock salts. What it's doing is the salt literally is treating the air, and it's anti-infective. You can get these salt rooms. So like the ultimate is like a sauna that's made out of like salt, and the salt heats up, and the salt lamps hamp too. But I'm talking about, they make it so you can actually breathe it right into the nose. And that's a thing, if you live in a toxic environment, or even if you have any of these other conditions, which is it's the infection, it's your teeth or something like that, it's essentially kind of breathing in almost like a natural antibiotic, but it's good. And it's, again, not like the bad thing of an antibiotic. That's one of the things in terms of how can I get it up into the sinuses. We talked about, like, for instance, even doing like the neti pot. The neti pots can be very, very, they make this mechanical one. And I really like, if you're going to clean this out, with what water do you use? You use salt water. So let's say a good sea salt in the water. And then sometimes you use xylitol, powdered xylitol in the water. And then sometimes you use a half and half mixture of hydrogen peroxide, because then that creates, now don't use straight hydrogen peroxide, the one in the brown bottle, the one that you could buy at like CVS. You're going to cut that in half with water, because if you did it straight, it'll bubble up and fizz like that like crazy. You want it like half and half, and sometimes even less than that, right? So the point is what it's doing is it's liberating oxygen. And many of the infection stuff that is inside the actual local sinuses and the teeth and stuff like that are these anaerobic. And which means it's kind of like, if you give them oxygen, it's kind of like the Wicked Witch of the West. I'm melting. The salt does the same thing. So there's a couple things that we can provide and bathe that area in these different types of airs and juices. So the neti pot is the juices: salt water, xylitol water, hydrogen peroxide water, and then, like I said, the inhaler, or even the halotherapy, where we're just in an environment where we're especially sleeping, when we're sleeping at night. And then again, there are many, many people that it's also connected to a sleep apnea. And the apnea machine has been very, very helpful, and in terms of keeping the sinuses up and getting them to breathe and stuff like that. But this is from the top to the bottom and the bottom to up, everything it could be. And the big thing is, again, tracking it down where it is for you. Now, there's people where it's the trifecta of all of these things. And many people go, when am I going to fix it? Oh, if you got all of these things, and see, again, the sinuses are doing that because it's reacting to one of these things. There's something toxic that you're making it breathe, that you're making it be in, that you're not letting it clean out. And that's the biggest thing, is it's, again, the problems in sinuses are oftentimes a legitimate reaction to something else that's going on, that your body is desperate to get you to track it down. Now, that's what I do, is I can help to track, and I can do these testing methods and also determination and help guide you through these things so that we can come to the actual, what is it? And once we've, done everything that needs to be possible, then we can say, then it works. Because many times with sinuses, the people that even are the experts, or for instance, you going, well, I just went to the store and then I took on the counter, is leading you in a wrong direction, and it's giving you relief, but it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, and eventually it really will, come calling. And people that deal with sinuses and really track it down, especially with the dental stuff, you got to get this under your head. You're going to buy yourself more years of life, or even more quality of the years that you get, because sinus problems are misery for many people, and they're also misery for the people that are around you. I'm sorry, but we're annoying. My wife will tell me, like, oh, did you eat dairy? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I can tell. You just started getting sniffly. And I'm like, darn it, you're right, But it's true, because there are sometimes, now I can handle dairy sometimes, and sometimes I can't. So there's different factors, and it also has to do with how strong your body is. But if your body has to be that strong to take something, then, it might be better to cut it out for a while and at least track down what to cut out and what to bring in, because that's another thing. Food is high on the totem pole of the list, and that means it's another thing that you're doing to yourself and you just don't know it. And those are great things to know about, because if you can track those things down and go into life, then you've just taken off a big, huge chunk of what is the big cause of our problems, of especially Western people. That's what it is we're not getting enough, and it's too toxic, and we're just not doing the right things. And it's also connected to a couple things that it's staring you right in front of your face, but you wouldn't think about it. Oh, yeah, the teeth are right there. Oh, yeah, my guts are right there. Oh, yeah, there's that time I got my nose broken. Oh, yeah, there's that whiplash that I had. Oh, my goodness. I just didn't put two and two together. It's huge, because I've had a lot of success with sinus people and tracking these things down and putting them together and satisfying what the body is saying, I need you to fix for me. And again, that is a lot of sinuses is the canary in the coal mine. It's telling you something's going on. So start listening to your body, and I can help you. So it's Jason Eagle, your natural health authority. Until next time, bye-bye.